Do your raiders complain that raids are slow? Do you find that trash just drags on for hours? Does your guild spend half the raid AFK for one reason or another? This guide explains how to combat the bad behaviors that lead to slow raids, and it works for any guild. While the backdrop is our Naxx speed clear, this guide has nothing to do with Naxx. We've been raiding like this since Molten Core. It applies to any dungeon at any level of content that your guild may be at.
Alright, so let's do this. We're going in. Focus up. 1 hour, 30 minutes is the time to beat. Let's do it.
While speedruns take extra timing, moving quickly and efficiently through a dungeon doesn't require special coordination, tricks, stunts, great gear, or great players. Having faster, more fun raids is within the reach of every guild that wants it. You too can clear Naxx in 2.5 hours or less. Why would you want to do this? Slow raids lead to bored raiders. Bored raiders lead to more mistakes. Mistakes make raids drag on for hours. Learning to raid quickly speeds up both farming nights and progression content, since getting to the hard boss faster gives you more time to practice. Fusion raids 5 days a week, a little over 20 hours, and yet keeps up with many guilds raiding 6 or 7 days. We do this, in part, because we have a culture of moving fast and using our time in raids as effectively as possible. Having fewer deaths and minimizing downtime will do more to speed up your evening than extra DPS. While we've been clearing Naxx since launch, we are by no means decked out in best-in-slot gear, and we're obviously not wearing gear from the next tier of content. Being focused and efficient has nothing to do with yelling and abuse, and everything to do with letting the guild know what to expect and holding people to that. It's about setting expectations that raid time is focus time, and the faster you get done the better. Most raiders are happier when they don't feel like they're spending half the night waiting for someone else. So what's this about? It's about 3 things. 1. Minimizing time spent on trash. 2. Minimizing your downtime. And 3. Being a good leader. Trash is key. The biggest mistake people make is dismissing trash, raid leaders and raiders alike. The bulk of your time in an instance, unless you're working on a hard boss, will be spent clearing trash. People going AFK, not giving their best, or otherwise dragging their feet will slow down your raid far more than anything else. Your tanks, or hunters if you pull with a hunter, set the pace of pulls, and the best way to speed up trash DPS is, well, pulling trash faster. Consider having a trash tank if you have an eager but less senior tank who you know can keep up the pace. Make sure the tank is responsible, however. Raid frames or some method of monitoring health and mana are critical. Pulling when half the healers are dead or everyone is at 10% mana will just lead to wipes and frustration. Your raiders' attention will drift if you don't keep things moving forwards. Have your other officers help you keep the raid moving if you're tired or aren't prone to impatience yourself. If you need to, set target clear times for each wing, and use the stopwatch in-game to remind yourself to remind the raid to keep moving. All tanks have AE tanking capabilities, and taunt can be used at range now. Expect your tanks to keep pulls under control. There's no reason not to AE all easy trash. It can help to have a tank play catch. This tank is responsible for noticing mobs shooting off after an eager mage or warlock and taunt them and bring them back into the fold. Your plate classes can throw in tanking gear on trash even if they're DPS spec. This can help keep things more under control. Death is a fact of life. Handle it. Have a reser assigned for incidental trash deaths if you need to. A death is never a reason to stop pulling, nor is rebuffing a reason to stop pulling. Make sure your tank and raid leaders have raid frames, however. A pull that just wiped out, 3/4 of the healers due to loose mobs means you should take a small break unless you want a total wipe on the next pull. Most of the time, you shouldn't pause for drinking either. Casters and healers should drink while the next pull begins. Running heavy on healers and tanks both slows down the raid and makes people lazy. When there's fewer tanks and healers, they may pay more attention since there aren't as many people to pick up their slack. We've noticed that we actually have more deaths rather than fewer if we run with extra. This doesn't mean to sit them and not let them raid. Encourage them to get DPS specs and gear and rotate around who is healing and tanking that week and who is DPSing. It's a good way to give people variety. In summary, take trash seriously. Find pullers that are responsible yet impatient. Set targets wing by wing to keep the focus on moving quickly. Make sure you have enough tanks for trash. DPS spec tanks work for almost everything. And finally, don't stop for a few deaths or rebuffs, just do it as you keep moving. Loot distribution consumes a huge amount of time for most guilds. Regardless of your system, consider using Master Looter so everyone else can clear trash while you assign loot. If you use DKP, have your Master Looter be managing DKP also, so only one person is tied up. If you use random, encourage quick rolls and keep moving. If instead you have a loot council, like we do, minimize the number of people involved in decisions. More than 4 or 5 is unwieldy, and there needs to be someone empowered with the ability to say, "We're doing this," end of discussion. Only the really big-ticket, high-upgrade items need a lot of discussion time, so get used to making fast decisions for tier tokens and normal-size upgrades, ideally in under a minute. Plan breaks so people know what to expect. We raid for 4.5 hours a night, so we always take a 5 to 10 minute break after flasks drop. When people know there's a break coming, they're less tempted to take random AFKs. When AFKs do happen, they shouldn't slow you down. For the most part, you can keep moving, even if someone is AFK or disconnected. That point leads us right into, never ask questions that everyone has to answer. Is everyone ready? Can we start polls? Neither of these is useful because you don't care if people are ready. You only care if someone isn't. So a better question to ask is, who isn't ready? Or, better still, don't even ask. We're polling in 15 seconds. Your raiders will learn to speak up if that's an issue. In summary, do loot quickly, no matter what your loot system. Plan your AFK breaks, have a break both beforehand and one mid-raid. And finally, don't ask questions and wait for the whole guild to answer. Simply tell them and see if anyone objects. You need a good rapport between your tanks and healers. Help build that by encouraging communication on vent so the healers feel energized and not overwhelmed, and the tanks feel confident of their pulse speed. Having heals assigned to specific tanks can give those tanks confidence to move forwards the pull since they know they're being covered. Good raid leaders aren't just impatient, they're also lazy. They don't want to do all the work themselves. Raid leader just means you're where the buck stops, not that you do everything. If you're using a main assist, don't have that guy be the same person who's going ahead and marking targets. Have the healers coordinate amongst themselves, so before you reach the boss, they already know how healing will be arranged. Before you reach the boss, tanks should know what they're going to be doing. And if a class needs to coordinate interrupts or sheeps or something else, remind them to coordinate it, but don't do it for them. There's no reason to accept poor play on trash. It's more fun to keep moving on a raid than to hang around waiting for people to come back for AFK the 50th time that night. There's still space for joking on vent and for having fun. What changes is people's attitudes towards what's actually going on with their game in between bosses. Don't spend 30 minutes before each boss setting up. Expect people to review what they need to do as they're approaching the boss, and then just spend a brief period reminding people of important highlights before engage. There's nothing wrong with your guild if you need to remind them about details of boss fights or that this is a particularly nasty trash pack. There's nothing wrong if you call out waves on Sarth or remind people to stand in the sparks on Malagos. Even the best raider has a brain fart on occasion, and when you're talking 25 people, the odds are going to get pretty high in each attempt that someone will screw up once. Don't sit there ahead of time on the boss detailing out every ability, but do a quick review on the last trash pack right before the boss is pulled.
A Nubercon, pretty basic shit. Did we have, what can we have, Dutch? Tank both adds, does that work? And just straight burn down?
I'll die.
Yeah, should be fine.
But I can do it.
Nah. We can just put the paladin.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
In a full DPS spec, I'll die.
Okay, that's not good. Orc. We'll have Orc do it. He can shield wall from the end. Mixna, same shit. Pretty much burn through it, get people off the wall. Hygen. Do not die to dance, or you're dumb. For Gothic, we'll just split up physical DPS on dead side, casters on live side, healers, I'm assuming you guys can split up as need be. We'll do Arcadu and Orc on dead side, Dutch and Baz on live side.
In summary, encourage tanks and healers to chat and keep up a good rapport. Delegate everything that you can. Make sure your guild is still having fun. Plan ahead for bosses. And remember, there's nothing wrong with reminding your raid about things either before or during a boss. A common response I hear is, "Well, that's nice and all, but if we try what you say, we'll just wipe." Well, sure, possibly, but you won't wipe for that long. People will adjust to the new pace of raiding. Once you have your raid's confidence, the best way to understand what rate of pulling is best is actually to wipe, and then scale back a bit. You won't know your limits until you actually break them. After some time raiding this way, your raiders will become accustomed to moving more quickly and will take less prodding and nagging from you. You can't ever let your guard down. If you're slow that night, well, the raid will be too. But it takes less of a push to get things rolling when people's expectations are changed about what the pace of a raid will be. Remember though, fun doesn't mean ignore errors. An important part of being a raid leader is addressing mistakes. You don't need to rant and rage over every slight error someone makes, but similarly, you shouldn't ignore repeated errors or repeatedly careless play. If you're either a main tank or a raid leader, you can start doing this right now with your next raid. Your guild is capable of it as long as you're willing to put in the effort. And this doesn't take the fun out of raiding. It means people spend less time on the icky stuff like trash and more time grabbing purples and chatting with their friends. Remember, it's not about being a dictator on vent and yelling at people. It's just about keeping the raid cheerful, focused, and always moving. To review, it's okay to wipe a bit while changing how you raid, and sometimes that's the best way to understand what your current limits are. This all gets easier with practice, and soon your raiders will just expect raids to go faster, and they'll be more attentive. Have fun, but don't ignore repeated big mistakes. They will slow you down. And finally, there's no magic here. Just focus and hard work, but it is attainable. Now, this part isn't for every guild, but it's definitely part of what makes Fusion so fast at moving through dungeons, so I figured I should mention it. See, we don't really use raid symbols, or CC targets, and we don't have a main assist. Having our kill order be, target the nearest non-CC'd mob and unload on it, speeds things up considerably as long as your healers don't run out of mana. Debuffs tend to work out too, since your caster clump usually gets on the same mob when they just do target nearest, and so does your melee clump. Sometimes when it's a hard pull, we will use raid symbols, but they're for the tank convenience more than anything else. If you still like raid symbols and kill orders, check out the magic marker mod. It helps a lot with marking. I hope this movie was helpful. The StratFu site has a section dedicated to this topic, including top 10 tips, links to raid leading add-ons, more tips than were in this movie, and links to the actual video of the speedrun, both normal speed and 3 times sped up. It also has boss strategies and videos, leadership articles, class guides, and more.